is copy down as I say each of these instructions into your notebook. So pause this video for a second if you don't have your notebook and a pencil and maybe some different colored pencils or a highlighter. It might be a good idea to get those. All right, so these are a couple of the verbs that were in our story. Now, the infinitive, you guys learned in Spanish 1, is the unconjugated form. It means to do something. So, for example, to drink, to prepare, to return, to call oneself, to wake oneself up, to brush oneself, to shower oneself, to take something off oneself, and to lay oneself down. You will also notice that for reflexive verbs, there's a se at the end. So that tells us that the verb is reflexive. So these first three are not reflexive. Now, if we look at the yo form, like we've talked about in the past, the verb is going to end in o when we're talking about ourselves. And if you notice for the reflexives, the only thing you add in the front is the me. Endings are still the same, but you just put me in front if it is indeed a reflexive verb because you're doing it to yourself. For the tu form, when you're talking to someone, when you're asking them a question or you're saying, do you do this, you do this, it's going to end in as for an AR verb. So we're just looking at AR verbs right now. Tomar, preparar, so it's going to end in as. You just put the te in front. So the endings are still the same, as all the way through. You just put a te in front if it's reflexive. Moving on to the third person, this is the one that you definitely want to copy down because you guys have the yo form in your quiz list because really the most important thing is to be able to talk about your own routine at this point. But the he, she, they singular form, this is the form where when you're talking about someone, we said it ends in a or e. Well, since these are AR verbs, it's going to end in a. They all end in a. And you just put a se in front if it's reflexive. Now, if you think about the plural, ellos, ellas, ellas, and ustedes, they or you all, the only difference is that you're going to put an N at the end. That is the only difference. So, they or you all, you just add an N. Toman, preparan, regresan, se llaman. The se will stay the same. Se despiertan. So if you're talking singular, se despierta, she wakes up. They wake up, se despiertan. So you add ends all the way through for they and you all. All right, so go ahead and copy these down. And then we're going to move on to just a couple more. So these are going to be the other verbs that were in the Mad Lib story that we talked about and that you'll also see either you've seen before in our class or you'll see in the Quizlet. So once again, the infinitives are the unconjugated form. So like hacer means to do or to make. Poner, well, ponerse means to put on oneself like clothing, like we know. Poner, without being reflexive, just means to put. Makes sense, right? Because you've got poner, to put, make it reflexive, to put on oneself. So we're going to look at these. These are all ER verbs, right? We have AR, ER, and IR verbs. And here we're looking at ER verbs. So if you look, though, these all have little stars by them because they're slightly irregular. They still end in O. As you can see, they still end in O because we're talking about ourselves. But they are called a go verb because they have a GO at the end. Hago, pongo, me pongo. So that's why I put a little asterisk there, and you may just want to highlight that to remind yourself. But then we go back to regular. So when we're talking to someone, verbs end in AS or ES because these are ER verbs. They're going to end in ES. And then for he, she, and they singular, verbs end in A or E. These are ER verbs, so it's going to end in E. So hace, or if we want to say they or you all, make it plural, hacen. They or you all put, ponen. They or you all put on yourselves, put something on, se ponen. All right, and the last category here, these are the irregular. So we have soy, eres, es, and then son is the ustedes form. These are all irregular, so let's just put asterisks next to each of them because they don't follow a rule. They're just something that you have to memorize. All right, ir means to go. Same thing. It is irregular all the way through. Voy, vas, va. And then we saw this verb, which I hadn't really talked about yet in the Mad Libs. We saw that it is se va. A su trabajo is what it said. So that person, whoever your character was in the Mad Libs, went to work. So irse, unlike to go, means to leave. Why? It may not make as much sense because it doesn't make sense. It's reflexive. So this one, you're just going to have to kind of say, all right, I'm going to take a note on this. This one logically doesn't make sense. When you make ir, to go, reflexive, it means to leave. All right, so just put that metese in front. Van and se van. We're just adding an N at the end for the plural, for they or you all. These are verbs we're going to see again and again because they're so useful. And if you notice, a bunch of these, in fact, all of these, are on the yellow verbs on my classroom because they're some of the most frequently used verbs in the Spanish language. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at one of your classmates' stories from Mad Libs, and then I'm going to ask you a question based on each of these sentences, excuse me, and I want you to write your answer in your notebook. So we have, hola, se llama Lily. So the first part, se llama Lily. So my question for you is, ¿cómo te llamas? Easy question to start off with. Remember, you are always going for novice, mid at least, complete sentence. So you want to make sure you respond with my name is, and feel free to use your notes to find out if you can't remember how to say my name is. Next question. Es una chinchilla pequeña. ¿Eres una chinchilla? No, obviously not. So respond in a complete sentence. I'm going to bold these questions so you can see them. Pause as you need to. All right. Cada día se despierta a las 2:30 y se ducha con jugo. All right, so my question for you is, ¿a qué hora te despiertas? Remember, you need to respond in a full sentence. We're going for novice mid at Spanish too. My question for you is, ¿te pones una chaqueta cuando vas a la escuela? And we can say típicamente, right? Because this is a routine. Típicamente. All right. Hace su desayuno favorito, pan y macarrones. So we could say, haces desayuno para tu hermano. And we can once again add típicamente. If you don't have a sibling, specifically a brother here because it says hermano, then you got a pretty easy answer, right? All right. Entonces, the next question or the next sentence says, toma un refresco y se va a su trabajo. So, toma un refresco. So my question for you is, ¿tomas café? And my second question is, ¿Cuándo te vas a la escuela? Now, keep in mind, I'm not asking when you go, I'm asking when you leave for school. All right, so my question for you here is, ¿a qué hora regresas a casa hoy? Now, hoy means today. Te cepillas los dientes con pasta de dientes o con papel higiénico. ¿A qué hora te acuestas? Típicamente. Since this means what time do you lay down, it doesn't have to mean necessarily what time you fall asleep. Dormir, IR verb, but same endings. So duermo, duermes, duerme. And to say they or you all fall asleep, duermen. If we want to make this reflexive, so dormir means to sleep. And then if you want to make it reflexive, it means to go to sleep. We talked about this when we first started talking about reflexives. It means to literally like put yourself to sleep. So to fall asleep, essentially. So that'd be me duermo, te duermes, se duerme, o se duermen. So that's the last question. So I'm going to ask you down here, ¿a qué hora te acuestas típicamente? And then I'm going to add on there, ¿a qué hora te duermes típicamente? Because those might be different. If you fall asleep right away after laying down, great for you. But some people, it takes a little while.